The shrill sound of Karen's voice pierced through the excited chattering of parents and children filling the small community art gallery. All eyes turned towards the epicenter of the commotion, where Karen stood fuming, her bony finger pointed accusingly at the vibrant paintings lining the walls. This is an outrage. Who, in their right mind, thought these hideous colors were appropriate for a children's art show? She screeched, her face flushed with indignation. The young artists, some no more than 8 years old, shrank back, their proud expressions morphing into ones of confusion and hurt. Karen's gaze swept across the room, coldly appraising each painting as if they were blights on her carefully curated world. This is a disgrace. These paintings are an assault on the senses. They do not belong here, she declared, her voice dripping with disdain. The gallery director, a kind-hearted woman named Meredith, approached Karen cautiously, her hands raised in a placating gesture. "Mrs. Sinclair, I understand your concerns, but these are the works of very talented young artists. Perhaps we could find a compromise." "Compromise?" Karen interrupted, her eyes narrowing menacingly. "There is no room for compromise when it comes to proper aesthetics. This display is an insult to art, and I will not stand for it." Meredith opened her mouth to respond, but before she could utter a word, Karen turned on her heel and stormed towards the entrance, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "I'm shutting this disastrous exhibit down. You have 1 hour to remove all these abominations from my gallery," she declared, her voice dripping with disdain. The parents and children stood in stunned silence, their excitement and pride replaced by a heavy blanket of confusion and disbelief. Meredith rushed after Karen, pleading with her to reconsider, but the woman was already out the door, her ultimatum echoing in the stunned gallery. As the minutes ticked by, the young artists began to gather their paintings, their small faces etched with disappointment and sorrow. One child, a shy 10-year-old named Timmy, hesitated, his gaze fixed on the vibrant abstract he had poured his heart into. Tears welled in his eyes as he carefully wrapped the canvas, his dream of seeing his work displayed shattered by the capricious whims of a single woman. In the midst of the chaos, a strangely familiar figure emerged from the crowd. It was Karen's nephew, a 12-year-old named Zach, his own painting in hand. He watched, his expression unreadable, as the other children packed up their creations, his aunt's reign of terror casting a pall over the once joyous event. As the last painting was removed from the walls, Meredith stood in the empty gallery, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She had tried to reason with Karen, but the woman's unwavering stance and blatant disregard for the children's feelings had left her feeling helpless. With a heavy heart, she turned off the lights, silently wondering how she would break the news to the young artists and their families. The story was far from over, and the consequences of Karen's actions were only just beginning to unfold. The fallout from Karen's outburst at the children's art show reverberated throughout the tight-knit community. News of her callous behavior spread like wildfire, sparking outrage and disbelief among parents and local residents. Meredith, the distraught gallery director, spent the following days fielding angry phone calls and online comments, each one more scathing than the last. The young artists and their families were devastated, their excitement over the showcase replaced by a deep sense of disappointment and hurt. Amid the public outcry, one person remained conspicuously silent. Karen's nephew, Zach. The 12-year-old had quietly slipped away from the gallery as the other children packed up their artwork, his own painting tucked under his arm. In the days that followed, he avoided his aunt, choosing instead to immerse himself in his sketchbook, his pencil moving feverishly across the pages. Karen, on the other hand, seemed unfazed by the backlash. She continued her usual routine, her designer outfits and perfectly coiffed appearance, a stark contrast to the grief she had inflicted on the young artists. Whenever the subject of the art show came up, she would simply wave a dismissive hand and declare that she was doing what was best for the community. But Meredith refused to let the matter rest. Determined to right the wrong, she organized a private meeting with Karen, hoping to appeal to the woman's better nature and convince her to reconsider her stance. Mrs. Sinclair, I understand that the artwork may not have aligned with your personal tastes, but these are the creations of children, talented, enthusiastic children who were crushed by your actions, Meredith pleaded, her voice tinged with desperation. Karen, however, remained unmoved. My dear, you simply don't understand. Art is not about individual expression or feelings. It's about creating something visually pleasing, and those paintings simply did not meet that standard, she said, her tone condescending. But the children put their hearts into those paintings. They were so proud to have their work displayed, and you took that away from them, Meredith argued, her frustration growing. Precisely. They need to learn that their feelings are irrelevant when it comes to art. Coddling them will only breed mediocrity. I was doing them a favor, Karen replied, her lips curling into a self-satisfied smile. Meredith stared at the woman in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the level of callousness and entitlement that had driven her actions. As she left the meeting, a single thought echoed in her mind. How could someone be so heartless towards these children? Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Karen, her nephew Zach had been observing the exchange from a nearby window. His eyes narrowed in a mixture of anger and disappointment. The young artist had seen firsthand the impact of his aunt's cruelty, and he knew that something had to be done. As the public outcry over Karen's behavior continued to swell, her nephew, Zach, found himself increasingly troubled by his aunt's callous actions. The 12-year-old artist had watched in dismay as the other children's dreams were crushed, their vibrant paintings unceremoniously removed from the gallery walls. Zach's own painting, a bold abstract work that had taken him weeks to complete, remained hidden away, its fate uncertain. He had been so excited to see it displayed alongside the other young artist's creations, but his aunt's tyrannical reign had shattered that dream. One evening, as Zach sat alone in his room, the memory of the children's crestfallen faces haunted him. He thought of Timmy, the shy 10-year-old whose tears had sparked such a visceral reaction within him. Zach knew he couldn't remain silent any longer. He had to take a stand against his aunt's entitled behavior. Gathering his courage, Zach approached Karen, determined to confront her at the art show debacle. Aunt Karen, I need to talk to you about what happened at the gallery, he began, his voice trembling slightly. Karen, who had been engrossed in a fashion magazine, looked up with a bored expression. What about it, dear? I thought I made my position on that dreadful display quite clear. But Aunt Karen, those paintings were made by children who put their hearts into their work. You had no right to shut down the show like that, Zach argued, his frustration growing. Karen's eyes narrowed, and she let out a dismissive snort. Zach, you simply don't understand the importance of maintaining artistic standards. Those paintings were an eyesore, and I was doing the community a favor by removing them. A favor? Zach exclaimed, his voice rising in pitch. You destroyed those kids' dreams. They were so proud to have their art displayed, and you took that away from them. Nonsense. They'll get over it. What they need is proper guidance and training, not coddling, Karen replied, waving a manicured hand. Zach stared at his aunt, his disbelief turning to anger. But you didn't even give them a chance. You just walked in and shut everything down because you didn't like the colors. That's not fair. Karen fixed her nephew with a stern glare. Life isn't fair, Zach. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions for the greater good. You'll understand when you're older. Realizing that he was getting nowhere with his aunt, Zach clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. No, Aunt Karen. I understand perfectly well that you're just a heartless, entitled woman who doesn't care about anyone but yourself. Before Karen could respond, Zach turned and stormed out of the room, his painting still tucked safely under his arm. He had seen the devastation his aunt had wrought, and he knew he couldn't let it stand. Something had to be done, and Zach was determined to find a way to right the wrong. In the days following Zach's confrontation with his aunt, the young artist found himself increasingly withdrawn and pensive. The memory of the children's crushed dreams and the look of indifference on Karen's face haunted him, and he knew he couldn't simply stand by and let her get away with her callous behavior. As Zach pored over his sketchbook, his pencil moving furiously across the pages, an idea began to take shape. He would use his own art to right the wrong that his aunt had committed, to give the young artists the platform they deserved. Inspired by the vibrant hues and bold strokes of the paintings that had been so unceremoniously removed from the gallery, Zach set to work, his fingers flying across the canvas as he brought his vision to life. The young artist channeled his anger, his frustration, and his determination into every brushstroke, creating a masterpiece that captured the essence of the children's artistic expression. When the painting was finally complete, Zach stood back, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and resolve. This was more than just a work of art. It was a statement, a defiant cry against the injustice that had been perpetrated against the young artists. Without hesitation, Zach reached out to Meredith, the gallery director, and shared his plan. The woman listened, her eyes widening with a glimmer of hope as Zach outlined his proposal. Together, they set to work, coordinating with the families of the children whose art had been unceremoniously removed from the gallery, rallying them to support Zach's bold endeavor. The day of the exhibition arrived, and the small community gallery was once again filled with the excited chatter of parents and children. But this time, the atmosphere was different. There was a palpable sense of anticipation and determination in the air. As the doors opened, the attendees were greeted by a stunning display. Zach's painting, a vibrant, abstract masterpiece, took center stage, surrounded by the original works that had been removed from the previous show. Each child's name was proudly displayed alongside their creation, a testament to their talent and resilience. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Gasps of awe and applause filled the room as the visitors marveled at the array of artworks. Parents embraced their children, tears of joy streaming down their faces as they witnessed the restoration of their young artist's dreams. And in the midst of the celebration, one figure stood apart, her face a mask of bewilderment and rage. Karen Sinclair, the self-appointed arbiter of artistic taste, could only stare in stunned silence as the community celebrated the very creations she had deemed unworthy. Zach, his eyes gleaming with a sense of triumph, caught his aunt's gaze and held it, silently daring her to challenge the success of his endeavor. For once, Karen Sinclair found herself at a loss for words, her entitled facade crumbling in the face of her nephew's unwavering determination and the community's heartfelt embrace of the young artist's work. The resounding success of Zach's exhibition sent shockwaves through the community, sparking a renewed sense of pride and validation for the young artists whose dreams had been so callously crushed by Karen's actions. As the gallery quickly became the talk of the town, Karen found herself the reluctant center of attention, but not in the way she had hoped. Instead of basking in the glow of her perceived superiority, she found herself the target of widespread criticism and derision. Neighbors who had once politely nodded in her direction now turned their backs, while acquaintances who had previously sought her favor suddenly refused to acknowledge her presence. Karen's carefully curated social standing, so painstakingly built over the years, was crumbling before her eyes. Determined to salvage her reputation, Karen tried to interject herself into the conversation, but her attempts were met with icy dismissal. "How dare you try to take credit for this?" One mother snapped, her eyes narrowed in contempt. "Your nephew is the one who made this happen, not you." Karen's face flushed with a mixture of humiliation and anger. "I was simply trying to maintain the integrity of the art show," she protested weakly, but her words fell on deaf ears. "Integrity?" Another parent scoffed. "You destroyed these children's dreams because you didn't like the colors. That's not integrity. That's pure selfishness and cruelty." Zach, who had been watching the exchange from a nearby corner, felt a sense of grim satisfaction as he witnessed his aunt's social standing disintegrate. He knew that his actions had not only restored the young artist's faith in their abilities, but had also shone the spotlight on the entitlement and callousness that had driven Karen's behavior. As the days passed, the community's outrage only seemed to grow. Meredith, the gallery director, was inundated with calls and messages, all of them praising Zach's initiative and condemning Karen's actions. Some even went so far as to demand that the woman be barred from the gallery, a prospect that filled Karen with a sense of dread. Trapped in a social media maelstrom of her own making, Karen found herself retreating further and further into her carefully curated world, her once impeccable facade crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny. Gone were the days when she could command attention and respect with a mere flick of her wrist. Now she was the subject of scorn and derision, a cautionary tale of unchecked entitlement and the consequences of trampling on the dreams of others. As Zach watched his aunt's downfall unfold, he couldn't help but feel a bittersweet sense of satisfaction. He had stood up for what he believed in, and in doing so, he had not only restored the young artist's faith, but had also exposed the ugly truth about his aunt's character. The road ahead might not be an easy one, but Zach knew that he had taken a crucial step towards righting the wrongs that had been committed. As the fallout from the children's art show scandal continued to reverberate through the community, Karen Sinclair found herself increasingly isolated and ostracized. The once feared socialite had become the subject of widespread ridicule and contempt, her entitled behavior and callous disregard for the young artist's dreams the talk of the town. Desperate to salvage her tarnished reputation, Karen attempted to regain control of the narrative, but her efforts were met with even greater opposition. She tried to organize a private meeting with the gallery director, Meredith, hoping to negotiate a way to have the exhibition shut down, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sinclair, but the community has spoken, and they've made it clear that they want this exhibition to continue," Meredith said, her voice laced with a barely concealed sense of triumph. Zach's work has become a symbol of hope and resilience, and the parents and children have rallied behind it. I'm afraid there's nothing you can do to stop it. Karen's face contorted with rage, her manicured nails digging into the palms of her hands. "This is an outrage. I won't stand for this travesty of art being displayed in my gallery. It's an insult to everything I've worked for." Meredith simply shook her head, her expression uncompromising. "This is no longer your gallery, Mrs. Sinclair. The community has embraced Zach's vision, and they're not about to let you take that away from them. I suggest you find a way to come to terms with it." Seething with fury, Karen stormed out of the gallery, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floor. As she made her way home, she couldn't help but feel a growing sense of desperation. Her carefully curated world was crumbling around her, and she had no idea how to regain control. Zach, meanwhile, had become a local hero, the young artist whose determination and artistic vision had triumphed over his aunt's entitled behavior. The community rallied around him, showering him with praise and support, and even offering to help him pursue his artistic dreams. For Zach, the outpouring of love and appreciation was both overwhelming and humbling. He had never sought the spotlight, but he couldn't deny the sense of satisfaction he felt in seeing his aunt's downfall. He knew that his actions had not only restored the young artist's faith in themselves, but had also exposed the ugly truth about his aunt's character. As the exhibition continued to draw crowds, Zach found himself the subject of numerous interviews and media requests. He used this platform to shine a light on the importance of nurturing and supporting young artists, encouraging others to follow their passions and not be deterred by those who sought to stifle their creativity. Karen, on the other hand, retreated further into her private world, her once impeccable reputation in shambles. She had lost the respect of her peers, the admiration of the community, and the loyalty of her own nephew. The weight of her actions had finally caught up with her, and she was forced to confront the harsh reality that her entitled behavior had consequences. As the community continued to rally around Zach and the young artists, Karen Sinclair found herself sinking deeper into a spiral of despair and isolation. Her once unassailable social standing had crumbled, leaving her grasping for any semblance of control or relevance. Desperate to regain her footing, Karen began to lash out, her venomous words and scathing attacks only serving to further alienate her from those around her. She bombarded Meredith with a barrage of angry phone calls and emails, demanding that the exhibition be shut down, but the gallery director remained steadfast in her refusal. "This exhibition is not about you, Mrs. Sinclair," Meredith told her, her voice firm and unyielding. "It's about the talent and resilience of these young artists, and the community has embraced that. Your attempts to sabotage it will only make things worse for you." Undeterred, Karen turned her attention to Zach, hoping to strike at the very heart of the exhibition's success. She cornered him one day, her eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and desperation. "How dare you defy me, Zach?" she hissed, her bony fingers digging into his arm. "This is all your fault. You've ruined everything I've worked for." Zach stared at his aunt, his expression unwavering. "No, Aunt Karen, this is your own doing. You're the one who tried to crush the dreams of those children, and you're the one who's now facing the consequences of your actions." Karen's grip tightened, her nails drawing blood. "I should have never allowed you to display that monstrosity of a painting. It's an insult to art, and it's made a laughingstock of me." Zach winced at the pain, but he refused to back down. "That monstrosity is a symbol of hope and resilience for the community. Something you'll never understand because all you care about is your own ego and your precious reputation." With a frustrated growl, Karen released her hold on Zach's arm, her eyes narrowing to slits. "Mark my words, Zach. I'll make you pay for this. No one makes a fool of Karen Sinclair and gets away with it." As she stormed off, Zach couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. He knew his aunt was capable of anything, and the glint of malice in her eyes told him that she was not above resorting to underhanded tactics to get what she wanted. Determined to protect the exhibition and the young artists, Zach quickly reached out to Meredith, informing her of Karen's threat. The gallery director, who had become a trusted ally, wasted no time in putting additional security measures in place, ensuring that the event would continue without interruption. Meanwhile, Karen retreated to the solace of her home, her carefully cultivated world crumbling around her. She paced the floors, her mind racing as she plotted her next move. Failure was not an option. She would do whatever it took to regain control and restore her shattered reputation, even if it meant resorting to underhanded tactics. The stage was set for a showdown, and the stakes had never been higher. The tension in the air was palpable as the final day of the children's art exhibition approached. Karen Sinclair, the once formidable socialite whose reputation had been shattered by her own entitled behavior, had retreated into the shadows, silently plotting her next move. Zach, the young artist whose vibrant painting had become the centerpiece of the exhibition, remained vigilant, aware that his aunt's threats were not to be taken lightly. He had shared his concerns with Meredith, the gallery director, who had taken steps to ensure the event's security. As the doors to the gallery opened, the community flooded in, their faces alight with excitement and anticipation. The young artists, their pride and confidence restored, beamed as visitors marveled at their creations. Zach, standing amidst the crowd, felt a swell of pride and a deep sense of satisfaction. But the peace was short-lived. Just as the exhibition was reaching its peak, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Heads turned, and gasps of shock and horror filled the air as Karen Sinclair, her designer clothes disheveled and her carefully curated facade crumbling, burst through the doors. In her hand, she clutched a can of paint, its contents dripping from her fingertips. With a wild, crazed expression, she charged towards Zach's prized painting, her intention clear. "You'll pay for this, Zach," she screamed, her voice shrill and guttural. "I won't let you destroy everything I've worked for." Meredith and the security guards sprang into action, but before they could reach her, Karen had already flung the contents of the paint can onto the canvas, obliterating the vibrant colors and the delicate brushstrokes that had become a symbol of hope and resilience. The crowd erupted in a collective gasp of horror, their faces etched with disbelief and outrage. Zach, his eyes wide with shock, watched in stunned silence as his aunt's vandalism unfolded before him. But before Karen could inflict any further damage, the security guards wrestled her to the ground, their grip unyielding. The woman thrashed and screamed, her wild eyes filled with a twisted sense of triumph. "You see," she cried, her voice tinged with a deranged laughter. "I told you I would make you pay, Zach. No one makes a fool of Karen Sinclair and gets away with it." As the police were called and Karen was led away in handcuffs, the stunned silence in the gallery gave way to a torrent of emotions. Tears flowed freely, both from the young artists whose dreams had been shattered once again and from the community members who had rallied behind their cause. Zach, his heart heavy with a mixture of sadness and anger, approached the ruined painting, his fingers tracing the dripping lines of paint. In that moment, he realized that his aunt's desperate, vindictive act had only served to strengthen the resolve of the community, solidifying their commitment to supporting the young artists and their creative expression. As the cleanup began and the exhibition was temporarily closed, Zach found himself surrounded by a sea of empathetic faces, each one offering words of encouragement and support. It was then that he knew, despite the tragedy of the day, that the true victory belonged to the young artists and the community that had rallied behind them. Karen Sinclair's reign of entitlement and callousness had finally come to an end, and in its wake, a renewed spirit of hope and resilience had taken root, one that would continue to inspire and empower the young artists for years to come.